A new Ipsos poll reveals voters in Ontario will be largely driven by healthcare and several pocketbook issues when determining how they'll vote in the upcoming election. Joining us now with more on what issues are rounding up the top five, we are joined by Ipsos pollster Daryl Bricker. Good morning, Daryl. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Candace.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So let's start with an overview of the main findings of the poll. What issues are top of mind for Ontarians as we head into this election?
Well, the top five, the first two really relate to healthcare. The first being healthcare, but followed by handling of COVID. But everything after that relates to the cost of living. So whether it's the cost of real estate, the cost of taxes, or the cost of just day-to-day living really dominate the issues agenda. So what people are really going to be focusing on, I think, is concern about health, but very rapidly following after that, everything that has to do with how much things are costing these days.
So, Daryl, do you think this is, a long-term influence, or do you think it's just been the recent events of the last 2 years that are influencing the people of Ontario right now?
Well, I think on the issue of housing, it's been a problem for a while, particularly in the major cities and the suburbs of the province, where real estate prices have become way beyond what they were in the past. But particularly over the space of the pandemic, real estate has accelerated to a level that I don't think anybody was prepared for. And as a result of that, it's really interesting to see who's most upset about it. It's not the usual, downtown low income, finding housing for the homeless type issues that we usually see on surveys. It's people saying that middle-class families are not able to gain access to the types of homes that they aspired to. So this is a new issue, not something that we saw in the last election campaign, and certainly not something that we saw 2 years ago.
Okay, so the polling also took a look at which party Ontarians feel is best equipped to deal with these top issues. And when it comes to the incumbent Tories, the people of this province think they are the best to handle lowering taxes and helping with the cost of day-to-day living, as opposed to the NDP, which are often seen as the ones to help out the little guy. What do you make of that?
Yeah, we also see the NDP does well on anything related to healthcare, but the Liberals do best on managing COVID, which is probably a splashover from the federal situation. But yes, everything related to cost of living, with the exception of housing. And on the issue of housing, that's one in which nobody sees that no party is seen as the one that's superior. So there's a real opening there for the opposition parties. And on that issue, the Progressive Conservative Party is actually third.
Okay, so Doug Ford's PCs are losing to the NDP and Liberals, as we just saw, when it comes to which party would be best to deal with the top two issues on this list, which are healthcare and COVID. But as we hopefully turn the corner from the pandemic in the foreseeable future, how concerned should the Tories be about that? And how much will the pandemic and healthcare matter by the time we get to the polls on June 2nd?
Well, it depends on what happens with the pandemic. So if we're going through an ongoing process of improvement, and there's been some challenges to that over the last little while, I think that what you're going to see is that healthcare and the pandemic aren't going to be the ballot questions in the campaign. I think everything is going to move on to these issues of cost of living, and the vulnerability for the Conservatives on that is probably related to the issue of housing, as I keep repeating. But if they're able to fight this on lowering taxes or lowering the cost of day-to-day costs for individual Ontarians, then the Conservatives are actually in a pretty good place to dominate the campaign.
So, Daryl, let's tap into some of your expertise and experience in dealing with elections. What do you think the NDP and or the Liberals need to do to convince voters that they are the best to handle pocketbook issues, and how could they shift their campaigns?
Well, typically what the NDP's done a good job of is moving the conversation about cost of living from just a philosophical point of view to, like a big E economics thing, as I usually call it, down to real kitchen table types of economics. And that's usually where you see the NDP do well. So it's a bit surprising that the Conservatives are doing better there, but there's an opportunity for the NDP to really push on that, because it tends to be part of their reputation. But the Liberals are in a really tough spot, and the biggest problem that they suffer from right now is just nobody knows who their leader is. So, while they may want to talk about issues, the problem is that they have a leader that's not particularly an effective communicator for them right now.
I see. Well, thanks again for your time and your insight, folks. That's Daryl Bricker. I'm sure we'll see him more as we lead up to the June 2nd election, and that's Ipsos pollster. Thanks again, Daryl.